This is Jed Distler, and welcome to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. At least I hope it's friendly. I try to be friendly. You can subscribe to the Piano Maven podcast through my Substack page by clicking on the link in the episode description. And I hope you will consider a paid subscription because you'll get bonuses like free downloads at the beginning of every month. And if you subscribe, you will definitely help keep this podcast in production throughout the rest of this year. At the end of our first season of podcasts, I did an episode about piano box sets that I would like to see released. And I got a lot of positive and interesting listener response to my propositions. But I've been thinking more about this topic, so I've come up with another list of 10 piano reissues or box sets that I would really like to see, and I think maybe you'd like to see them also. So here we go. The first on my list is a complete edition of Edwin Fischer's commercial recordings. Now, we have had many reissues of this wonderful pianist, but we haven't quite had all of his commercial recordings on CD, at least in the West. There have been some loose ends here and there. For instance, some of the Beethoven sonatas that he recorded in the 1950s have never made it onto CD, so far as I know. But I think that a truly complete edition of Edwin Fischer's commercial 78s and LPs as both pianist and conductor really should be all boxed up. I think this is something that either Warner Music or APR could do, and I think this collection could include any live Edwin Fischer items that EMI had previously released, or if there are any live performances that they could get away with issuing where there are no problems with copyright or licensing. Number 2 on my list, I would love to see a complete edition of the recordings by pianist Beveridge Webster for the Dover label and the Desto label. Beveridge Webster was a great American pianist who had studied with Isidore Philippe and Nadia Boulanger in Paris. And he also studied with Arthur Schnabel in Berlin. He had met Ravel in Paris, in fact, and he was the pianist who played the world premiere of the Zigane for piano and violin. I don't know who the violinist was for that performance. But in addition to French repertoire, Beveridge Webster was a fervent champion of new American music. He made the world premiere recording of Elliott Carter's Piano Sonata, for example. And for the Desto label, he recorded the complete solo piano works of Debussy. And for the budget Dover label in the 1960s, this was a record label that was affiliated with Dover Books. Remember, Dover would do all of these inexpensive reprints of music and literature. Well, they had a label also, and there were quite a few LPs. And there was a certain time when you could find sealed copies of Dover LPs for 99 cents in some store in New York. I have a vivid memory of seeing those LPs, but I don't remember which store. But in any event, for Dover, Beveridge Webster recorded quite a bit. He recorded the Schumann Noveletten, all of Stravinsky's piano music. There was a disc of the Second Viennese School composers, a wonderful Beethoven Hammerklavier sonata he did for Dover. He recorded Ravel's Gaspard de la Nuit and Le Tombeau de Couperin. He recorded Rachmaninoff's Etudes Tableau. There was a Brahms release. It's a very distinctive discography. I have no clue where these master tapes might be, if they still exist. But I would really do anything to see a complete Beveridge Webster edition. And maybe this could also include that Schubert disc he made for the American MGM label in the 1960s. And I almost forgot he did record the Roger Sessions Second Sonata, which is a fabulous recording. There also is a website called classicmusiccds.com. I've put a link to that in my episode description. These are historic CDRs that are sold by a record collector, and he has a 4-disc set drawn from the Beveridge Webster Dover catalog, and it also includes the Schubert MGM disc. But I haven't heard these CDRs, so I cannot vouch for the transfer quality. I would assume that they are copied from LPs, and they are not cheap, but I did put a link to it so you can explore and decide for yourself. Number 3 on my list, Imogen Cooper had recorded 6 CDs for the Ottavo label in the late 1980s and early 1990s. And this was a series called Schubert, The Last 6 Years, which included all of the piano music that he wrote in the last 6 years of his life, from 1823 through 1828. It's a marvelous collection, and it's not to be confused with the 3 double albums of live performances of Schubert's piano music for the Avi label. Those came out much, much later. But it's this Ottavo series I'm talking about, and you can find it online as a download and in streaming. But the physical discs are not so easy to source. Now, I don't know if they were boxed up before, but I really think that they should come out as a box set. I would really love to see these, and they really deserve much more attention. My 4th choice on this list, this is a total no-brainer. It's a complete edition of the RCA Victor and Columbia Masterworks recordings by the pianist Alicia de Larrocha. Portions of this great pianist's RCA Victor discography have been boxed up, like her Mozart cycle, the 3 Granados discs that she made for the label. But we really need to have all of Alicia de Larrocha's RCA material brought together and boxed up. I mean, how difficult could that be? And the set also should include her 1 solo Ravel disc that Columbia Masterworks brought out. I'm not sure if it ever came out in the West. I do have a Japanese CD copy of this. Also, there was a mono version of the Albéniz Iberia suite that came out, I think, in 1958 on 2 LPs on Columbia Masterworks. The one that was issued on Epic in stereo on LP was actually the Hispavox recording, which was published in the EMI Alicia de Larrocha box. So let's have Sony BMG bring out the complete Alicia de Larrocha RCA and Columbia album collection. How difficult could that be? And I know that it would sell like crazy. And I have another request of Sony BMG, which is number 5 on my list. This would be a box set of the complete Gold and Fizdale Columbia recordings. I'm talking about Arthur Gold and Robert Fizdale. They were a terrific 2-piano team. They were also authors, and they were television show cooking hosts. Now, some of their Columbia recordings have appeared as part of other box sets, but we could really use a complete and systematic survey of everything they did for Columbia Masterworks. There are some items that they've recorded that were never on CD, so far as I know. There was a wonderful coupling of the Bizet Jeu d'Enfant and the Brahms Haydn variations. They made a really fine recording of Schubert's Grand Duo that's long been missing in action. And, of course, all of the contemporary music they recorded in the 1950s deserves attention. Anyway, it's just a thought, but I think a complete Gold and Fizdale album collection would be great. I would love to see that happen. Now, this next item on my list, number 6 on my list, I had not realized that these recordings were available in download and streaming format, but I would love to see some kind of a physical incarnation of them. And these are the complete recordings of Messiaen piano music by the Brazilian pianist Josie de Oliveira that she made for the Vox label. She recorded the cycle Vingt Regards sur l'Enfant Jésus, and she also recorded the complete cycle of the Catalogue d'Oiseaux. And these were beautifully engineered, but I remember when they came out on LPs, the surfaces were just horrible. So I'd love to see these remastered on physical CDs, but I suppose you can get the download. So, maybe this isn't a very strong choice for number 6, but these are recordings that I think are quite special, and I would like to see it, so I'm keeping it on the list. But my 7th item on this list is something that may be kind of arcane, and it doesn't totally fit into the piano reissue theme because many of the items that I'll be talking about are not piano items or centered around piano, but there is quite a lot of piano here. But anyway, what I would love to see is a box set devoted to the complete classical releases issued on the Dial label. If you are a jazz maven, you probably know that Ross Russell started a record label called Dial in 1946. And he was mainly concentrating on modern jazz and the great bebop players like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and a lot of other musicians of that era. But in 1948, he stopped recording jazz and he turned his attention to contemporary classical music with a big concentration on the Second Viennese School. And this was in the very, very early days of LP. And some of these recordings were made in the US, but others were taken from French masters. Now, I don't have a complete Dial classical discography on hand, but I can tell you that some of the piano items were the Bartók Sonata for 2 pianos and percussion with William Masellos and Mauro Adjemian playing, and the percussionists Saul Goodman and Abraham Marcus. And there was also a reissue of the recording from 78 of Olivier Messiaen and Yvonne Loriot, his wife, playing Messiaen's Invasion de la Main for 2 pianos. I don't remember what label that was on. It came out in France in the late 40s, and there was this LP issue, and I used to have the LP a long time ago. There also was the Schoenberg Concerto with Claude Heffler as soloist. Also, there was a recording of the Alan Hovhaness Piano Concerto with Mauro Adjemian. And I think you can still find that on archive.org, but in a very scratchy copy, which is not very easy to listen to. Now, I have no idea where the original master discs or tapes for all of these Dial recordings live or if they exist. But I do think it would be kind of cool to have a box set of the complete classical Dial releases because there were not all that many of them, but I think it would be a very interesting thing to have. Number 8 on my list. Now, this is probably wishful thinking, but I would love to see all of the recordings that the American pianist Grant Johannesen made for the Golden Crest label, all brought together in one box set. I don't know if that could be done, but perhaps it could be because VAI brought out his complete Fauré piano music cycle on CD many years ago. So the master tapes must be lurking about somewhere. And he recorded quite a lot of interesting repertoire, a lot of French music that's not impressionist, which was kind of a specialty of his. There's a wonderful Goldberg variations of Bach, by the way, with Grant Johannesen. Surprisingly good. But let's see, maybe that could happen. Who knows who would bring that out? Number 9 on my list. Now, this is definitely wishful thinking. Many collectors know that there are several recordings on Deutsche Grammophon by pianist Christian Zimmerman that have never been on CD. One is the 14 Chopin waltzes, and then there was another disc with 4 Mozart sonatas. Now, there were some recordings of Brahms piano music that Christian Zimmerman recorded in the early 1980s that came out first on LP as part of Deutsche Grammophon's 1983 complete Brahms edition. And these recordings included the three piano sonatas, the Scherzo number 4, the Ballades opus 10, and the Bach Chaconne in Brahms' arrangement for piano left hand. Now, the Ballades and the Scherzo and the sonatas did appear on CD, but only very briefly. My understanding was that Zimmerman wasn't happy about this release on CD and that he requested that the CDs either be withdrawn from the catalog or they would not be pressed in any further editions. So I think it would be great to see all of these so-called forbidden Christian Zimmerman Deutsche Grammophon recordings brought out in a small box set. But, this is wishful thinking, and I highly doubt he would sanction a project like this. But, you never know, right? Now, for my 10th item on this list, this is a project that is so important, and it's really a crime that it's not available anymore. In the mid-1990s, the pianist and scholar and musicologist Artis Wodehouse produced this extraordinary collection of 7 CDs for the Pearl label. It was a series called Keyboard Wizards of the Gershwin Era, devoted to pianists and composer/pianists who were active in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, and all who were masters of what you might call novelty piano, meaning not quite jazz, but far more sophisticated than cocktail piano playing, and with a virtuosity that is really comparable to a lot of what you find in the most demanding classical repertoire. And most of these pianists were classically trained, and they specialized in virtuoso popular music. And most of what they played was not improvised, but either written out 100% or meticulously worked out beforehand. And the melody is always to the fore. And this is a genre that is so well worth exploring. And as I said, Artis Wodehouse was the curator and producer of this series, and all of the audio restoration was done by the great Seth B. Winner. So these old recordings sound as good as they are ever going to sound. I'm not going to go through the content in detail, but I'll go through what's on each volume. Volume 1 is dedicated to the pianist Pauline Alpert, who was a great virtuoso who Gershwin himself particularly loved. Volume 2 features the composer and pianist Dana Suisse. Volume 3 featured the piano duo of Arden and Allman. And the great novelty composer and pianist Zez Confrey gets all of Volume 4. He's probably most famous for Kitten on the Keys, and he recorded that several times, and you have several Zez Confrey recordings of Kitten on the Keys on this disc. Volume 5 was a compilation with various pianists. Volume 6 featured 3 women, Constance Mering, Muriel Pollock, and V. Longhurst. And the 7th and final volume featured another amazing virtuoso. Her name was Rae da Costa, R-A-I-E. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Now, I would imagine that Artis Wodehouse has the rights to the master tapes. I don't know if that's a fact or not. But I would love to see this entire series reissued. It really deserves a new lease on catalog life. So do you realistically think that we will see any of my box set wishes turn into reality soon? As the great jazz pianist Fats Waller used to say, one never knows, do one. This is Jed Disler, and you've been listening to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to being with you next time.